The Video That Shouldn't Exist Part 1. The discovery. Liam was an ordinary guy with an unhealthy obsession for obscure internet content. He wasn't looking for anything illegal or dangerous, just the weird, forgotten corners of the web where strange things lurked. It was during one of these deep dives that he stumbled upon a link. It was posted in an old, nearly abandoned forum dedicated to lost media. The thread was titled, "Has anyone else seen it?" but had no responses. The original post contained nothing but a single hyperlink and the words, "Watch at your own risk." Liam hesitated. He had seen enough internet horror stories to know better, but his curiosity was too strong. He clicked. The link led to a simple, black webpage with a single embedded video titled, "Playback, MP4. No description, no views, no comments. He hit play. At first, the video seemed like corrupted footage, static, distorted colors, and an eerie droning sound in the background. Then, for a split second, he saw an image, a dark room, a figure standing in the shadows, and then it was gone. The screen went black. Then his reflection appeared on the screen. Liam yelped and pulled back, but the video continued playing. The reflection wasn't normal. It was him, sitting at his desk, but something was wrong. His reflection wasn't moving in sync with him. It was watching him. The screen glitched, and the video ended. A new text box appeared on the webpage. "Thank you for watching. Please share." Liam's heart pounded. He closed the tab and tried to shake off the unease. It was just a creepy video, probably an art project or some ARG. Then his phone buzzed. A notification. An unknown number had sent him a message. "You shouldn't have watched that." Part 2. The glitch. Liam tried to laugh it off. It had to be a prank. Maybe the site logged his IP and sent an automated message to mess with him. Classic internet scare tactics. Still, he deleted the text and turned off his phone. But the unease wouldn't leave him. He kept glancing at his monitor, half expecting the video to start playing again on its own. Then, at 3:00 a.m., his laptop screen flickered on. He hadn't touched it. The video was back, but it wasn't the same one. This time, it showed his bedroom. It was a live feed, and the door behind him was slowly opening. Part 3. The presence. Liam's breath hitched. He whipped around, expecting to see someone standing in his doorway, but the room was empty. He turned back to his laptop. The video feed was still playing. The camera angle had changed. Now it was closer. The image flickered, distorting for a brief second, then stabilized again. A shadow moved across the screen, but there was nothing visible in his room. He reached for his phone, but it was dead. His laptop keyboard was unresponsive. Then, a new message appeared at the bottom of the video. "Why are you looking away?" Liam's pulse pounded in his ears. He slammed the laptop shut and backed away from his desk. The droning sound from the video continued, even though the screen was closed. A faint whisper echoed through his room. His closet door creaked open on its own. Liam ran. Part 4. The Entity. Liam sprinted into the hallway, his breath ragged. He flipped the light switch frantically, but the bulb only flickered before going out completely. The droning sound from his laptop followed him, growing louder. His phone vibrated in his pocket. He yanked it out and stared at the screen. A new message. "Don't run." His hands trembled as he tried to call anyone, but the screen glitched, filled with unreadable static before the phone powered off again. Then, from the darkness of his bedroom, a voice, raspy, distorted, whispered, "You let it in." A cold breath touched the back of his neck. Liam turned slowly. A figure stood in the hallway, barely visible in the dim light. Its head tilted unnaturally. Its eyes, if they were eyes, gleamed with static. The droning noise swelled, and the walls of his apartment seemed to warp, bending inward. His vision blurred, and for a moment, he felt like he was inside the video itself. The figure moved. Liam screamed. Part 5. The Vanishing. The next morning, Liam's apartment was silent. His laptop sat open on the desk, the screen black. The only thing on display was a single line of text. "Thank you for watching. Please share." Liam was gone. Days later, his friends reported him missing. The police found no signs of struggle, just his laptop, still powered on, playing a video that shouldn't exist. And somewhere, on an obscure corner of the internet, a new thread appeared. Has anyone else seen it? Part 6. The spread. A week after Liam's disappearance, his friend Marcus noticed something strange. Liam's Discord status was online. At first, Marcus assumed it was a glitch, or maybe someone had hacked his account. But then, late one night, he got a message from Liam. Watch this. Attached was a link. Marcus hesitated. His stomach twisted as he clicked, half expecting a phishing scam. But the link led to a familiar black webpage. The same one Liam had described before he vanished. The video was back, only this time the thumbnail was different. It was Liam, his face frozen in an expression of terror, his eyes completely black. Marcus slammed his laptop shut. His heart pounded. He had to be imagining this. Then his phone vibrated. A new message from Liam's number. You're next. Part 7. The infection. Marcus didn't sleep that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Liam's face in the video thumbnail. His hollow, blackened eyes. By morning, he convinced himself it had to be a prank. Some sick joke. Maybe a hacker was using Liam's account to mess with him. But then, his laptop turned on by itself. The screen was black, except for a single line of white text. Play me. Marcus's fingers trembled as he reached for the keyboard. He hesitated, then forced himself to press a key. The video started. It was footage of his own apartment, his own bedroom, filmed from just outside his window. The video glitched. The camera angle shifted. Now it was inside the apartment. The footage was coming closer. Marcus whipped around. The window was locked. The door was shut. No one was there. But the video kept playing. And then, a whisper from his laptop speakers. Let me in. Part 8. The watching. Marcus slammed his laptop shut. His pulse thundered in his ears. The whisper still echoed, even though the video had stopped. His phone screen flickered on. A new message from an unknown number. You left the door unlocked. Marcus's breath hitched. His eyes darted to the front door. It was locked. It had been locked all night. He was sure of it. His phone buzzed again. Check. Again. With shaking hands, he crept toward the door. His fingers barely brushed the handle when the lights flickered. His laptop screen flashed back on, playing another video. This time, it was a live feed of his living room, of him, standing by the door, and behind him a shadow. Part 9. The whispering. Marcus spun around. Nothing. But he felt it, a presence, heavy, watching. The video on his laptop kept playing. The shadow in the footage was closer now, right behind him. His phone vibrated again. Don't turn around. His breath came in ragged gasps. He bolted for his bedroom, slamming the door behind him. The moment the latch clicked, knocking. Soft, slow, right outside. Then a whisper. Distorted, crackling like bad audio. You let it in. The knocking grew louder, faster. Marcus pressed himself against the wall, squeezing his eyes shut. The lights flickered violently, the air turning ice cold. Then silence. His phone screen glowed. In the dark, a final message. Your turn. The bedroom door creaked open. Part 10. The spread continues. 3 days later, Marcus's friends started getting messages from his number. Watch this. Another link, another black webpage, another video, and in the thumbnail, Marcus, his eyes black, his mouth open in a silent scream. The cycle had begun again. Part 11. The loop. Nathan was the first to receive the message. It came at 3:03 a.m. Marcus's name appeared on his phone screen, but something felt wrong. The profile picture was distorted like a corrupted image file. The text was simple. Watch this. Nathan hesitated. He hadn't heard from Marcus in days. Rumors were already spreading his sudden disappearance. The police finding his laptop open, playing some strange video. His thumb hovered over the link. His gut screamed at him not to click, but curiosity won. The webpage loaded. A black screen. A single video. Playback. MP4. He hit play. It first. Just static. A familiar droning sound. Then an image. Marcus, sitting in his apartment, his back to the camera, his head tilted slightly, as if listening to something behind him. Then, in the reflection of his laptop screen, a figure, standing just outside the frame, watching. The screen glitched. Marcus turned to face the camera. His eyes were gone, 2 empty sockets, staring directly at Nathan. Then the video cut to black. A new message appeared on Nathan's phone. Now it's your turn. Part 12. The infection spreads. Nathan's stomach dropped. His hands trembled as he tried to exit the webpage, but his phone froze. Another message appeared. Don't ignore me. His screen flickered. The video restarted, but now it was his own bedroom, filmed from inside. The camera angle shifted. It was moving toward his bed. Nathan scrambled out of the blankets, heart pounding. He spun around, searching the dark corners of his room. Nothing. His phone buzzed again. Too late. A breath cold and slow brushed the back of his neck. Nathan turned. The last thing he saw was himself, his own reflection. But it wasn't moving like him. It was smiling. Part 13. The replacement then didn't scream. He couldn't. His body was frozen, locked in place as his reflection grinned back at him. It wasn't a normal smile. It was too wide, too sharp. The longer he looked, the more wrong it became, like his own face was stretching, distorting. Then it blinked, but Nathan hadn't. His reflection stepped forward. Nathan stumbled back, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The mirror glass didn't shatter. The reflection didn't need it. It was already in the room. Nathan tried to run, but his body wouldn't listen. His limbs stiffened, his vision blurred. The last thing he saw was himself, smiling, before everything went black. Part 14. The Silan Senathan's friends never heard from him again. His apartment remained untouched, no signs of forced entry, no struggle, just his phone, still unlocked. The last thing on the screen, a video. It was paused on the first frame. A dimly lit room, and Nathan, sitting perfectly still, staring at the camera, not blinking, not moving, just waiting. The play button flickered, and then a new message sent itself to every contact in his phone. Watch this. Part 15. The unseen Emma was the first to open the message. She hadn't spoken to Nathan in days, and the text unsettled her. The wording was too abrupt, too cold. Nathan never talked like that. Still, she clicked the link. The page loaded slowly, a black screen, a single video, playback, MP4. She hesitated. Something about the title felt familiar, like an itch in the back of her mind. But before she could close the tab, the video started on its own, static. The droning hum. Then Nathan. He sat on his bed, perfectly still, his expression blank, his eyes empty. Emma's pulse quickened. She leaned closer to the screen. Then Nathan moved, not naturally. His limbs jerked, like a puppet being controlled by invisible strings. His head snapped toward the camera. He opened his mouth and a distorted voice crackled through Emma's speakers. I see you. The screen glitched. For a split second, she saw her own reflection in the video. But she wasn't alone. Behind her something moved. Part 16. The watching never ends. Emma's breath hitched. She spun around. Her room was empty, but the video kept playing. Nathan's frozen face stared back at her. The image flickered, and suddenly, his lips curled into a grin. To wide, to wrong. Her phone vibrated. A new message, from Nathan's number. Turn around again. Emma's heart pounded. Her hands shook as she typed a response. This isn't funny. Where are you? 3 dots appeared. Typing. Then one final message. Behind you. The lights flickered, and the screen went black. Part 17. The reflection that wasn't Emma's breath came in short, panicked bursts. She didn't want to turn around, but something in the air shifted, like the room had stretched, warped around her. The silence felt too thick, too heavy. Her laptop screen flickered back on. A new video had started playing. It was a live feed of her, sitting at her desk, watching, but there was a delay. A split-second lag between her real movements and the ones on the screen. Emma lifted a trembling hand. Her reflection did the same. Then it smiled. Emma hadn't. Her fingers clenched the edge of her desk. Every nerve in her body screamed to move, to run, but the reflection stood up first, and Emma didn't. She was still sitting, frozen, watching as her own reflection turned away from the screen and walked toward her. Part 18. The imitation. The room felt colder. The droning hum from her speakers grew louder. Emma tried to move, but something was wrong. It felt like invisible hands held her in place, her limbs heavy as stone. On the screen, the reflection reached out. Emma felt a chill on her shoulder, but nothing was there. The video flickered. The reflection leaned closer. Its lips moved. No sound, just one sentence appearing in glitching subtitles at the bottom of the screen. You don't need this body anymore. Emma's own mouth opened, but she wasn't the one doing it. And then the screen went black. Part 19. The replacement. Emma's vision blurred. She was no longer sure where her body ended and where the reflection began. The weight of her own presence, her own skin felt foreign. Her phone buzzed again. Another message, from Nathan's number. You're next. It wasn't just a message anymore. The sound of it echoed in her mind, as if it was coming from somewhere deeper, darker than her phone. She tried to move, but the force that held her in place was too strong. Her muscles screamed, but she couldn't break free. On the screen, her reflection continued to smile, the wide, twisted grin too much like Nathan's last look. But it wasn't her smile anymore. It was a mockery, a copy. And then, the reflection began to step away. Emma felt her body do the same. It was no longer her who controlled her actions. The reflection was in charge. Part 20. The endless cycle. Next day, Emma's apartment was found empty. Her phone, still on the desk, was playing the same video. The thumbnail, her face, frozen in that horrible, mocking smile. Her friends tried calling. They tried texting. But the messages never got a reply. Every phone call went unanswered. The video continued to spread. It showed her sitting, frozen in place, staring directly into the camera. But now, her eyes were black, her mouth still stretched into that twisted grin, and in the reflection someone else, someone who had once been a part of her. The cycle was beginning again. Part 21. The witnesses. Weeks passed, but Emma's disappearance remained a mystery. No one could explain what had happened to her. Her friends, frantic and desperate, shared her last message, the link, the video, hoping someone would have an answer. But they only found more questions and more videos. Each new one was different, yet the same. The faces of the missing, the ones who watched the cursed video, were all there. Every new person who clicked on the link soon became part of the endless cycle. Their faces frozen, their bodies eerily still. Their reflections were never in sync with them, always moving on their own. The message remained the same: you're next. But this time, it wasn't a warning. It was a truth, a reality no one could escape. And still, people watched. They couldn't help themselves. They couldn't resist. It wasn't about curiosity anymore. It was about being a part of something bigger, something that wouldn't let them go. Some of the witnesses tried to fight it. They deleted the videos, they smashed their phones, wiped their hard drives. But it didn't matter. The video always came back. The strange, distorted message echoed in their minds: you can't escape what you've seen. One by one, their phones rang with a message from a number they didn't recognize. A link, a video, and always, it was the same: you're next. Part 22. The reflection that changed. Max was the next person to find the cursed video. He was the kind of person who ignored warnings, the type to laugh at urban legends and ghost stories. He was sure it was just a hoax, an internet prank designed to mess with gullible people. But when he opened the link, everything changed. At first, there was only static, the usual glitching hum. Then, the face of a girl appeared, eyes wide and staring directly at the camera. It was Emma, but the expression on her face was wrong. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, her lips cracked into a silent scream. Max almost closed the video, but then something caught his eye. The reflection behind her, a shadow, moving. Max froze. It was like nothing he had ever seen before. The shadow moved with such purpose, like it was alive. It shifted, stretching unnaturally across the screen, following her every movement. It reached toward her, toward him. Max wanted to shut the laptop, but it was too late. The reflection was already reaching out, and in that instant, Max realized he wasn't watching Emma anymore. He was watching himself. The shadow was no longer in the reflection. It was right behind him. Part 23. The touch. Max turned around quickly, but the room was empty. He felt his heart race in his chest. His breath quickened. The image from the video was burned into his mind: Emma's face, her hollow eyes staring at him, but it wasn't her anymore. It was the shadow, the figure. Something in the corner of his room moved, a sound, a whisper. Max felt the air grow cold. His skin tingled. You watched. Now you belong. The voice was soft, almost a soft whispering directly into his ear. He spun around, but there was nothing there. Nothing but the darkness, the silence. Then a hand touched his shoulder. Max screamed and spun back toward his laptop. The reflection on the screen was no longer his own. It was Emma. Her face was twisted, the grin wide, too wide to be human, and in her eyes darkness, a void. Max's own reflection, the one staring at the screen, wasn't moving. But the figure in the video was. It was walking toward him. Max tried to move, to scream, but his body wouldn't respond. His legs wouldn't move. His mouth wouldn't open. The figure was close now, too close. And in that moment, Max realized the figure wasn't walking toward him. It was walking toward the reflection. Max tried to look away, but the reflection wouldn't let him. And then everything went dark. Part 24. The Echo. Max woke up, gasping for air. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he scanned his surroundings. He was back in his room, his real room, the one he had tried to escape. But something was different. The shadows in the corners of the room were darker than before, and the silence felt oppressive, like the air itself was thickening around him. The laptop was still open, the screen now dark, save for a faint glow that seemed to pulse, as if alive. He reached for it, but stopped. The reflection in the darkened screen was wrong. He wasn't alone. Max's face stared back at him, but his reflection was smiling, too wide, too cruel. His eyes were completely black, the pupils completely gone, replaced by a void so deep it seemed to consume everything around him, and behind him a figure, a shadow. Max turned his head quickly, but nothing was there. The figure in the screen didn't follow the turn. It stayed still, watching him. "You can't escape," the whisper echoed in the room, vibrating through his bones, sending a chill down his spine. Max tried to close his eyes, to pretend it wasn't real, but the whispers grew louder, coming from all directions, getting closer. The room seemed to grow colder, the air thick with something unexplainable. He reached for his phone, desperate to contact someone, but the screen had already started to glitch. The same video popped up, and Max was staring back at it, not the real Max but the reflection. Part 25. The realization. Max finally understood. It wasn't just the reflection anymore. The thing in the mirror, the figure in the video, it was him. Or rather, it was a version of him. A version that wasn't him. Max was still frozen, unable to move, trapped in his own body. His reflection, his shadow, was the one controlling him now. It was moving slowly but surely, taking over his actions, his will. And then it spoke. "You're part of me now." Max tried to scream, but his body refused to obey. His throat was tight, his breath shallow. The whispers turned into soft, unintelligible words, something incomprehensible, like an ancient language. As the darkness around him grew, "We are one." The video on the laptop flickered, showing his reflection in real time, only it was different. The figure behind him was closer now. Max tried to twist away, but his reflection stayed still. It was the figure in the video. It was moving toward him, slowly, with an unnatural, jerky motion. The face of the figure was his own, but it wasn't Max anymore. It was something darker, something that shouldn't exist. Max watched as his reflection reached out and touched the screen. Then the figure stepped out of the reflection. It was in the room now, and it wasn't just looking at him anymore. It was smiling. Part 26. The news cycle. Max never left the room. His phone kept buzzing, but he couldn't answer it. The messages were always the same: "Watch this. It's your turn." And the figure in the reflection, the one that wasn't really him, kept watching. Days passed, but it felt like hours. Time didn't exist in the room anymore. The room had changed. It was like the walls were closing in, the corners darkened, the air colder. Max's reflection was still there, waiting. When someone came to look for him, they found only the laptop. The same video was playing, and on the screen, Max's face smiled back at them, just like the others, just like Emma. And in the reflection, there was someone new, someone who had clicked. The cycle never ends. Part 27. The others' days stretched into weeks, but the story of the cursed video continued to spread. People whispered about it in hushed tones, not sure if they believed in it or if they simply feared it too much to acknowledge. Still, the link continued to circulate, passed from one curious soul to another, and as the views climbed, more people found themselves trapped in the same horrifying cycle. Some tried to ignore it, but the video kept showing up on their phones, on their laptops, on their smart TVs, even on their gaming consoles. It didn't matter how many times they deleted it, how many firewalls they set up, the video always came back. The thing was, they didn't realize what it was doing to them, what it was turning them into. The video wasn't just a haunting. It wasn't just a disturbing anomaly in the digital world. It was a force, an unstoppable, relentless force, manipulating reality itself. Some people tried to escape the inevitable by leaving their homes, going to different cities, or even changing their identities. But every time they did, the reflection followed. The figure that smiled too wide. The figure that wasn't them. It was always there, lurking in the dark corners of their lives. They couldn't run, they couldn't hide. You watched. Now we are one. The message appeared on their screens, and every time, the number of viewers grew, and then another victim. Another face added to the endless sea of reflections. Part 28. The repetitionisha had heard the stories. She didn't believe them, of course. She was a skeptic too grounded in reality to fall for internet myths and creepy videos. But when she came across the thread, the one titled, "Has anyone else seen it?" she clicked anyway. At first, it seemed harmless. The video was eerie, yes, but nothing she couldn't shrug off. She didn't expect it to be anything more than just an internet prank, a hoax. But when she looked closer, she saw something, her own reflection, staring back at her from the darkened screen. It wasn't her normal reflection though. Her reflection wasn't smiling. It was grinning, wide to wide. And then her phone vibrated in her hand. A message. It's too late. Tasha didn't know what to do. She tried to close the video, but it wouldn't close. It wouldn't stop. The reflection on the screen wasn't hers anymore. The face wasn't hers. It was dark, hollow-eyed. It was empty, like an echo of something that shouldn't have been. It was watching her, but something was off. Tasha reached for her phone again, trying to call someone, anyone. But when she looked back at the screen, the reflection was gone. Her heart stopped. The reflection was behind her. The smile, the dark eyes. She spun around, but there was no one there. And then she heard the whisper, soft, almost a hum. "You're next." Part 29. The realization. Tasha couldn't escape the feeling. The room felt colder, the air thicker. Every shadow seemed to hold something sinister, something that wasn't quite right. Her heart hammered in her chest, and she kept glancing nervously at the screen. Her own reflection. It wasn't hers. It was moving on its own, its smile stretching even wider. She tried to close the video again, but it wouldn't stop. The image on the screen began to glitch, warping as if it was trying to escape. She could feel it, and then her reflection moved on its own again. Tasha froze. The reflection was now walking toward her. It wasn't her. She realized. It was the thing in the screen, the thing that wore her face. It stepped out of the video. The smile, the hollow eyes. It reached for her. Tasha screamed and backed away, but her legs wouldn't move. Her body felt as if it was frozen in place. She couldn't look away. She couldn't stop staring. And in the dark corner of her room, she saw it, the figure, the one that had been following her. The reflection was real now, no longer trapped in the screen. Tasha's phone buzzed again. A new message. "You shouldn't have watched." And then, just like that, the screen went black. She was left in total silence, alone in the dark. Part 30. The possession. Weeks passed, but no one saw or heard from Tasha again. Her phone was found, still unlocked. The same video played on repeat, over and over again. Her reflection stared back from the screen, but now it wasn't just Tasha in the reflection. It was anyone who watched. The reflection began to change, to distort. It wasn't just an image anymore. It was something more, something darker. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a promise. The cycle would never end, and the video would continue to spread until everyone had watched, until everyone had become part of the reflection, until everyone had become part of the cycle, and it would keep going. Always. No one would ever escape. Part 31. The fractured reality. Whispers never stopped. They were everywhere now, in every corner of the world, echoing through people's minds like a distant memory. They couldn't escape. As the video continued to spread, something shifted. People stopped seeing it as just a creepy video. They started to feel it, deep in their bones, a growing presence, a force too powerful to ignore. At first, it was small things. The way people would glance at mirrors and catch glimpses of something that wasn't supposed to be there. The way the shadows in their rooms seemed to move when they weren't looking. But as more people watched, the presence grew, and it didn't stay in the digital world anymore. It started to seep into the physical world, twisting reality itself. One by one, people began to disappear, and they weren't just gone. They were altered. When they returned, they weren't the same. They would smile too wide, their eyes hollow and empty. They would stare at you, not blinking, as if they were seeing something you couldn't. The reflection had taken them, and it wanted more. The line between the video and the real world blurred. Soon, people stopped speaking of the video altogether, as if doing so would bring them closer to it. The more they ignored it, the more it reached for them. stretching across the fabric of reality. It wasn't just a video anymore. It was a curse, and it was spreading faster than anyone realized. Part 32. The broken cycle. Aaron didn't know what to believe anymore. He had been trying to convince himself that it was all a hoax, some elaborate prank. But the strange events, the odd occurrences, kept getting worse. It started with the dreams. Every night, he would dream of a shadow, a figure dressed in darkness, watching him from the corner of his room. He would wake up in a cold sweat, but the figure would still be there waiting. And then the video appeared. Aaron had heard the rumors, but he never thought he'd be one of the ones who would click. He was too skeptical to cautious, but one night, when he was alone in his room, the video found him. He didn't know how. He didn't know why. All he knew was that he couldn't stop watching it. It started innocently enough, just like everyone else. A static-filled screen, distorted colors, the faint sound of a distant hum. But then, the figure appeared. The same figure that had haunted his dreams. Aaron tried to look away, but his eyes wouldn't leave the screen. The reflection grew clearer, its smile wider, more terrifying, and then it spoke. "You're mine now." Aaron slammed his hand against the keyboard, trying to close the window, but nothing worked. His body was frozen, his mind trapped in the video, pulled deeper into the darkness. The figure in the reflection reached out, its cold fingers grazing the screen. The sensation was real, like it was touching him, and then he saw it, the last thing he would ever see. The reflection in the video moved. It moved toward him, and then, just as it touched the screen, Aaron felt a jolt of pain shoot through his body. He screamed, but the sound was muted, drowned out by the hum that had grown deafening in his ears. The reflection pulled itself out of the screen, and Aaron was no longer alone. Part 33. The final step. Weeks had passed since Aaron's disappearance. His friends, his family had all searched for him, but no one had found any trace. It was like he had never existed. But the video, it kept playing, over and over. It had found its way to more people, more screens. Each time someone watched, the cycle grew. The reflection in the video grew more distorted, more monstrous, as if it was feeding on the fear and confusion of those who dared to look, and those who watched. They didn't return. They couldn't. The reflection had taken them, and it was becoming stronger. Now, no matter where someone went, no matter how far they ran, the reflection followed. The video, the curse had spread to everyone. The lines between the video and the real world had disappeared. Now, the world was nothing but an echo of what it once was. An endless cycle, repeating forever. People would click the link. They would watch. They would become part of the reflection. And, when they did, they would never leave. The thing in the reflection was waiting for its next victim. Always, always watching. It was no longer just a video. It was a reality. A broken, fractured reality. And there was no escape. Part 34. The end of the line. Max had been the last to try to stop it. He had heard the stories, seen the warnings, and still he clicked. He didn't believe it could affect him. Didn't believe it could take him. He had tried to warn people. He had tried to fight back. But the figure in the reflection had already taken hold of him. The last thing he saw was his own face, staring back at him through the screen. And then, he was gone. The video plays on. It always will. Because it was never about the video. It was about something much worse, something much darker, something that can't be erased. It's out there, and it's coming for you. Part 35. The unseen force. Max didn't know when the video had started controlling his thoughts. He remembered watching it out of sheer curiosity, but soon, his mind had begun to spiral. It wasn't just the image on the screen anymore, it was him. The reflection wasn't just a distortion. It was his own thoughts, his fears, and his deepest anxieties coming to life, twisted in a way he couldn't explain. Every time he blinked, it was there. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see it behind his eyelids. The reflection, no. The thing, it was never still. It was always moving, always reaching for him. He couldn't escape it. Max tried turning off his screen, unplugging his computer, but nothing worked. The reflection was inside his head. He started to hear whispers, distant voices, calling his name. They came from everywhere. The walls, the ceiling, the shadows in the corners of the room. Every time he looked away from the screen, they grew louder, and the reflection in the video would flicker, showing a version of him that wasn't quite right. It was as if the reflection could see him. It was as if it wanted him to see it. The Whispers got closer, until they filled his mind completely. You can't escape. We're here now. Max tried to scream, but his voice didn't make a sound. It was swallowed by the droning hum of the video, the sound reverberating in his skull, shaking him to the core. The screen flashed brighter and brighter, until he couldn't look away. The reflection grinned at him. Come closer, it whispered, its voice cold and insistent. Max stumbled backward, heart racing, but the reflection moved with him, stretching out of the screen, its fingers reaching toward him. His vision blurred, the room around him fading into darkness. The reflection's smile was the last thing he saw before everything went black. Part 36. The descent. When Max woke, he wasn't in his room anymore. He wasn't anywhere. The world around him was empty. He could still hear the hum of the video in his ears, but it wasn't coming from any device. It was everywhere. It was all around him, filling the void he was trapped in. He tried to speak, but no words came. He could see it now. The reflection no longer just a figment of his imagination was in the space with him. It was standing at the edge of his vision, watching him, grinning in that unsettling way. It wasn't human. It wasn't anything that could be described. The thing in the reflection had taken on a life of its own, stretching and contorting, changing its shape with every passing second. Its smile grew wider, stretching unnaturally, and its eyes gleamed like black holes. Max reached out to it, but his hands passed right through the figure. It wasn't solid, it was an illusion, a trap. He tried to move, but his legs wouldn't obey. He couldn't leave. He couldn't escape the reflection's gaze. Every time he closed his eyes, it was there, lurking in the darkness. And every time he opened them, it was closer. You're one of us now, the figure whispered. You will always be with us. Max tried to scream again, but there was no sound. No air, nothing. He was trapped in a world that didn't exist, in a nightmare that wouldn't end. The hum grew louder, until it drowned out everything else. The reflection moved closer, and then, he was swallowed by the darkness. Part 37. The endless loop. Days, months, or perhaps years passed. Time lost its meaning. The curse of the video had spread further than anyone could have predicted. More and more people fell victim to it. The video seemed to find its way into every corner of the internet, bypassing firewalls and security measures like it was nothing. And with each new viewer, the reflection grew stronger. The thing inside the screen fed on their fear, growing larger, more powerful with every soul it claimed. But it wasn't content with just staying in the digital world. It had begun to leak into the real one. One by one, people started disappearing from their homes. At first, it was subtle, an odd feeling in the air, a chill that no one could explain. Then, the disappearances became more frequent. People would vanish without a trace, leaving behind only their screens, still playing the cursed video. The only trace they left was their reflection. It would be there, in the glass of mirrors, in the screens of televisions and phones. It would follow them everywhere, no matter where they went. People couldn't escape it. They couldn't hide. The reflection was taking over. It was no longer just watching, it was consuming. Every person who watched the video was slowly absorbed into it, until they became one with the reflection. They were part of it now, and every time someone disappeared, the video would show up again, in a different place, a different form. It was alive, and it was hungry. The line between the real world and the video began to blur completely. It wasn't just a nightmare anymore. It was a new reality. A reality where the reflection ruled. No one knew what would happen when the cycle reached its end. But they all knew one thing for sure. No one would ever be free again. Part 38. The reflection's reachit had been a long time since anyone had heard from the outside world. The last few survivors, those who hadn't been fully consumed, could feel the reflection stretching toward them, inching ever closer. The air was thick with the sense of something waiting, watching, and the shadows in the corners of their rooms seemed to grow larger with each passing day. The video was still out there. It always would be, and with every passing minute, its reach grew longer, stronger, more powerful. It didn't matter where you were. It didn't matter who you were. Once you watched, you were already marked, and when the reflection finally took hold, it would leave nothing behind but an empty shell. The curse would continue, and there would be no one left to stop it. Part 39. The echoes of the last world as they knew it had already begun to unravel. There were no more news stories, no more warnings, Every trace of the outside world was disappearing, swallowed by the reflection. People had become shells of themselves, their bodies still existing, but their minds trapped, lost forever in the reflection. The more time passed, the harder it became to remember what life had been like before the video. Some tried to fight, tried to push back against the growing darkness, but it was futile. The video had already claimed them. It was in their minds, in their thoughts, whispering to them constantly, reminding them that it was too late. The whispers were everywhere now. They came from the walls, from the floor, from the shadows of every room. You couldn't escape them, and they weren't just whispers anymore. They were voices. We see you. We hear you. You belong to us now. At night, when the moon was hidden behind clouds, strange figures would appear in the corners of rooms. Shadows of people who had disappeared, their faces twisted into grotesque smiles. They were still watching, still listening, always moving in the periphery of your vision. Sometimes, if you dared to look, you could see them clearer, those who had already been consumed by the reflection. Their eyes would gleam with static, their faces slack with a smile that didn't belong. But their eyes were empty. They weren't alive anymore. They had become part of the reflection, part of the curse, and now they were watching you. Part 40. The Hungersa had been one of the last survivors. She hadn't watched the video, at least, not yet, but she could feel its presence creeping toward her, clawing at her every waking moment. It wasn't just the reflections anymore. No matter where she went, she could see them, shadows moving in the corner of her vision, figures that weren't quite there, but still were. The hunger was palpable now. It wasn't just a presence, it was a force. It was alive. It was growing stronger with every person it took. And it wasn't stopping. Every corner of her apartment felt darker. Every room felt smaller, more suffocating. The hum of the video seemed to be getting louder, even though the screen was turned off. The whispers came at night, when she tried to sleep. They filled her dreams, filled her thoughts, and then, one night, it happened. She woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of her phone vibrating on the nightstand. It was a new message. The message was from an unknown number. It's too late. It's already inside you. Sarah froze. She didn't know who had sent it, but she knew that the reflection had found her. It had already started. She checked the time on her phone. 3:00 a.m., and then she saw it, a shadow in the corner of the room, creeping out from the dark. Slowly, almost deliberately, it moved toward her. It wasn't human. It couldn't be. The figure was tall and hunched, its eyes glowing with a cold, unnatural light. It moved without sound, its limbs contorting as if it was being pulled in multiple directions at once. It was the reflection, and it was coming for her. Part 41. The final descent. Sarah's heart raced as she stumbled backward, desperately trying to push herself away from the approaching shadow. She reached for the door, but her hands were shaking so violently that she couldn't grasp the handle. The drone was deafening now, filling every corner of her mind. It was impossible to think, impossible to move. As the figure drew nearer, its eyes were locked on her now, the static dancing behind its gaze, the grotesque grin stretching wider with every passing second. It was no longer just an image. It was alive, alive in a way she couldn't comprehend. Suddenly, the reflection's hand shot out, grabbing her wrist with inhuman strength. The touch was cold, like ice, and it sent a shock of terror through her body. The figure leaned in closer, its voice a guttural whisper that rattled her bones. "You're mine." The static filled her ears, and everything around her seemed to warp and distort. The room was no longer real. It was melting away, replaced by the never-ending darkness of the reflection. And then Sarah's vision blurred entirely. Her scream was drowned out by the hum, and just like that, she was gone. Part 42. The world lost as the days passed. More people disappeared, and the video spread even further. No matter how hard people tried to stop it, no matter how many times they deleted the link, it found its way back. It always found its way back. It was as if the video had become a part of the fabric of reality itself, slowly unraveling everything in its path. People no longer left their homes. The streets were empty, the buildings abandoned. There were no more sounds, no more life, just the whispers, the hum, and the reflection. The last few survivors, if they could still be called that, wandered in a haze, their minds consumed by the reflection, their souls lost to the video. They had all become a part of it, twisted and distorted. The reflection had claimed them, and there was no going back. The curse had taken over. The world was no more, and now, all that was left was the video. The reflection was everywhere. It was in the mirrors, in the screens, in the shadows. It had become reality, and soon, it would be your turn. Part 43. The final watch. Somewhere, in the deepest corners of the internet, the video still waits. It sits, hidden, in the darkest forums, waiting for the next curious soul to find it. And when they do, it will begin again. The reflection will find them. It will reach out, and they will be gone, and the cycle will repeat forever. Part 44. The inescapably. It had all started as just a harmless click, one mistake, one moment of weakness, and now the world was unraveling. No one was left untouched. Everyone who had seen the video had become part of it, part of the darkness, part of the reflection. There was no escaping it. The world had become a shadow of itself. The reflection stretched across every surface, every screen, every mirror. It had infected everything, and there was no safe place to hide. No one knew how it had started or who had created it, but it didn't matter anymore. The reflection wasn't just a video. It was a force, an entity, and it was growing stronger with each person it consumed. And then, one fateful night, another message appeared. Welcome back. It was the same message that Liam had received, the same message that had haunted everyone who had ever watched the cursed video. But it wasn't just a message anymore. It was a command. Watch again, the text urged, and the reflection moved again. Slowly, silently, it spread its tendrils across the remnants of the world, stretching farther and farther until there was nowhere to go. And it knew what you were thinking. It could hear your thoughts, feel your fear. The video knew you. It knew your every weakness, your every fear, and it was coming for you. Part 45. The mirror's truthser's final scream echoed through the darkened halls of her mind. The reflection had claimed her, but that was only the beginning. It was never just about the video. It was never about what it showed. It was about what it could do. And what it did was far worse than anything anyone could have imagined. The reflection wasn't just a thing you watched. It was a doorway, a portal. It didn't just take your soul, it replaced it. And once you were in, once the video had you, you could never escape. But the worst part, the reflection had no end. It just kept growing, spreading, pulling in more and more people, until the world was nothing but a dark, empty space. The video had erased everything, and now there was nothing left but the reflection. And no matter where you went, no matter how far you ran, it was always there. And as Sarah stood, trapped within the endless dark, she knew there was no going back. Part 46. The final glitch. It was happening faster now. People were vanishing. One by one, they disappeared without a trace. Their homes, their lives gone. All that was left was the video, constantly circulating through the web, pulling in more and more victims. And there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. Liam had tried. He had fought. But in the end, the reflection had claimed him too. It claimed them all. And now, there was only one rule. You can't stop it. You can't run. You can only watch. The video wasn't just a story. It was reality. It was the end of everything. And as the final glitch flickered on the screen, the last image of the reflection burned into Sarah's mind. She was part of it now. There was no way out. Part 47. The end. As he read, the world was a husk, a hollow shell, and the reflection was all that remained. It was no longer just a video. It was a living entity that had consumed everything. Everything that had once been real. The video was now a force, a presence that could not be defeated. It had found a way into every mind, into every home. And no one remembered how it started. No one remembered how they had gotten here. All that was left was the reflection. It was in every corner, every dark place, waiting for the next person to stumble across it. And once they did, it would begin again, because that was the way it worked. That was the way it had to work. It was always watching, and now you were part of it. Part 48. The cycle. Conuseth video would never end. It couldn't. It was too powerful, too hungry, and every time it took someone, it only grew stronger. It was only a matter of time before someone else found it, before the cycle began. Again, the reflection would keep spreading, and one day, it would be your turn.